Howdy, friends. Steve DePoe here for the Rose Realty team with this week's real estate vlog for North Texas. Trending adults moving back home. Now, for some of y'all, this would be an alarming trend, and for those, it's an interesting factoid. So let's just kind of get into it and see which side you fall on. So moving back home. So among the 18 to 25-year-olds, there's a 12% decline in individuals living on their own, or transitioning from school. Either with 18 to 25, it's either transitioning from high school out into the workforce, living on their own, or exiting college with a degree and then living on their own. This translates into about a $726 million decline in rent revenue, which is around 1.4% of the U.S. rental market. Uh, so a lot of these kids are living with grandparents. Around 32 million adults right now are living with a grandparent as of April of this year. That's up almost 10% and 9.7% compared to the same time last year. That's right now the highest percentage on record. Now, why is this? There's a couple of reasons. You remember this kind of trend started, I'm going to say, back around 8 years ago when we had the new norm of unemployment. I really hate new norm because things change constantly. Okay, we're calling this with the face masks new norm. Well, you know what? There's going to be a time a year from now, 6 months from now, we're not wearing face masks anymore, so it's no longer a norm. Okay. Anyway, so you might call it a current trend. Anyway, about 8 years ago when unemployment was sky high and we said we're never going to recover, this is going to be the new norm, a lot of kids, when they were exiting high school or exiting college, were staying with the parents or moving in with grandparents, okay, because they couldn't get a job or they couldn't get a job to pay off student debt, those kinds of things. Right now it's a little bit different in that what's kind of going on is the pandemic had a decrease in jobs. There were a lot of furloughs. Kids just couldn't get jobs anymore, and so they had to do whatever they could. They had to move back with mom and dad, or they had to move in with grandparents, and that's what that previous slide just said. They had to move in with grandparents and stay with them while they're working in some kind of low hourly rate job before they get into the career that they really wanted to get into. Most of these folks between those 18 and 25 are Gen Zs, Generation Zs. The majority of those were moving back home between March and April of this year. Around 2.2 million out of the 2.7 million fell into that 18 to 25 bracket, which again are those Gen Z kind of kids. And so they're living with grandparents are up. The number of adults living with grandparents right now are at an all-time high, right? Which is a little scary, when you come down to it. Grandparents. Some cases it's beneficial to the grandparents to have a younger kid, younger grandchild kid hanging out. In other cases, they want to be on their own. They want to have their own life that they've worked so hard for, and the grandkid is nice to visit, but you wouldn't want to have them stay there long term, if you get my meaning. This graph kind of shows you how there's been an increase. You kind of look at the beginning of the beginning of the graph over here. The average seemed to be around 2%, something like that, living with grandparents. Right now, in April, in March of April of this year, it shot up to 9.7%. That's sort of an alarming trend, like bam, just like that. Now, what happened? That's when COVID hit, lockdowns hit, furloughs hit, layoffs hit, and so kids were just saying, well, what do I do now? And so we're moving in with grandma and grandpa, and we're actually moving back home with mom and dad in order to kind of try to make ends meet. They have student loans, they have obligations, car payments, etc., and so they're moving back home. That's not a good deal really for anybody. We want the kids to get out on their own and start living on their own. and supporting themselves. Mom and dad maybe just became empty nesters, and now they've got the reverse empty nest going on. And grandparents who have been sort of empty nesters for maybe a decade or two now have a grandkid living with them. So it's this pandemic, the Chinese flu, kind of really affected everybody. So that's some interesting factoids. Whether it affects you or not, maybe you probably know somebody who it's affected. Some interesting information there. Next week, we're going to talk about new trends or new norms. Again, I hate that new norms thing. But anyway, new trends or new norms in real estate. Now, this isn't only for buyers and sellers, but also about new trends in the real estate business in terms of real estate professionals. So I hope you tune in for that one. This is Steve DePoe with the Rose Realty Team. I'm going to bounce.